All right. We are now live. Thank you everyone for joining this. Everyone who is going to watch this. I see Catherine. I see Derek. Thank you both for being here. God bless you both. And we have a very special guest here today. So, my friend, why don't you go ahead, if you don't mind, give us a little introduction about yourself? And I know we've got some questions. Catherine has some questions. If anybody in the chat room has some, it sounds like you'll be happy to answer those right now here live with us.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is retired Army Infantry Sergeant Matthew Arthur Nikolai. I served from 2007 to 2015, and I was medically discharged from the Army Infantry as 11 Charlie. I served with none other than my brother in arms, David Crowley, who was an absolutely phenomenal soldier, a wonderful human being, and his story needs to be told. And the justice for him and his family needs to come now and swiftly. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
It would probably help if I unmuted myself. Then maybe that would work. That
There you go. I've done it
thank
all
you.
the
Rule
time.
number one.
I'm telling you, as I played Call of Duty professionally all the time, I've had nothing but problems with mics not being muted, and the wrong button, the stream cutting off, lost frames. It's common.
I mean, I can
Are
only
you
see it
using
on my screen. It shows that I'm muted here, but I guess I wasn't paying attention to my own
right?
screen here.
Are you using Streamlabs OBS or a different software?
We're using StreamYard. So
StreamYard.
StreamYard is
Okay, that's
yeah,
it.
it's pretty interesting. Yeah, because you can see the little
Excellent.
duck in the corner. Anyone who's watching
Oh,
this
there it
on
is.
YouTube, they'll
There it
see
is.
the
I
duck
get it. Yeah.
there,
Oh,
so they'll know that
that's
this
fine
is
with
the
it.
free version of it. But that's cool.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so well, my friend Catherine, she has about 8 questions here for you, and I'm just going to run through these here, and I think that's a good way to start this off. Question number one: did David talk about Kamel? Did you serve with him or did you serve with him prior to meeting her?
No, I actually did not have the opportunity to meet his wife because I graduated from basic training and then was immediately sent to Fort Hood to deploy 3 weeks later. That's when I actually was introduced to David and his stellar reputation as being a very, very hard nosed NCO, but fair and balanced. Um,
Nice.
I knew know that she was an absolute gem for him and giving him the solace and peace that he was searching for as a man who was tormented by these deployments and war. So her memory is not lost. It lives freely on. So we have that.
Excellent. So you started service in what year?
2007. I actually swore in just by no mistake of the cosmos, September 11th, 2007. No joke.
Interesting. Wow. There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
So it was quite a trip, but I was 24. I wasn't really going anywhere with my life, and I decided, you know what? I need to do something. I need to change something. I need to make a commitment to something as a young man, and that's what I did. I joined the infantry, and couldn't have happened to a better group of guys because I got to meet some really excellent people while I served. And the whole joke is that if you're in the infantry, you're some moron. You can't go to college, whatever. Some of the smartest men I ever met was while serving in the United States Army Infantry. I mean, some guys scored on the ASVAB, 98s, 99s, and it was just phenomenal to converse with them and work with them. And David, being the intelligent person that he was, I looked upon him as a mentor, and I was just, when I walked onto Fort Hood the first time, I felt like I had never been born, and I was introduced to him on a weapons draw, and he was just like, "Hey, why is your charging handle to the rear?" And I was just like, "So you can inspect it easier, Sergeant." And he was just like, "Oh, we got a smartass on our hand," and I was like, "Yes, Sergeant, that is true." And we became good friends right after that because he knew that I looked upon him as someone that I could aspire to be in the ranks of the NCO world and brotherhood. So he was a great light in my service.
That's pretty interesting. And that was in what was that in the States or was that overseas when this
That
happened?
was that was at Fort Hood, Texas. I didn't have I actually came into the service as an E4 because I already had my college degree. So when I walked on, I kind of felt like I was a Buck Cherry private, even though I was 4 grades above most people. But I treated it humbly and with respect because I knew I had to earn my place as a specialist there because I didn't have the experience. These guys had been training for a year and a half when I walked on, and they didn't know me from Adam. So I had to be very humble in those times. But I learned a lot from David. He made it the transition easier for me.
Very cool. That's pretty interesting. All right, I'm going to go to question number 2 here. Again, depending on when you served with David, how did he speak about his daughter? Was he excited, scared, uncertain about having a child? So you may not have, well, you may have. I'll let you answer the question. I'm not going to answer for
I
you.
have a little bit. I mean, he was giddy about it. He was excited, but also, as as any first time father knows, if they're true to their word, it takes a gentle man to raise a daughter. And he was, even though he was very focused on what he was doing with his filming career and everything afterwards, he wanted to be a dad. And it can be scary for anybody. And this is coming from a guy who deployed multiple times and saw some horrific stuff on his deployments. But I had never seen him so like scared, excited mixture for bringing a child into the world, and that really like centered him besides his wife Kamala.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
All right, I'll get to the next one here. We had number 3. Did David ever speak about the government? If so, in what capacity?
Oh man.
Uh oh.
Well, yeah, okay. Um, well, I mean, I was in Afghanistan almost 15 years ago, so I think I could talk about this freely. Um, as we all know, David had a very laser-like focus when it came to anything he put his mind to. And when we were when we had exited Afghanistan, we came back to Fort Hood. We were standing in line to go through our in processing for going on leave and everything else. And he was standing there talking to me, and uh, we were talking about like going to film school and stuff like that. He's like, I'm getting out. I'm going to Full Sail University. And I was like, bro, I can't get out now. I re-upped. And he looked at me and said, you're stupid. Like flat out just called me stupid. And I was just like, I have to. My wife and I are happy here. It just seems like the right fit for me. And he was like, well, I'm going to Full Sail to get my film degree. And he was very excited about it in his deadpan kind of way. I mean, he was just a matter of fact kind of guy. When he joked, it was very deadpan, but it was funny. So when we're standing there talking about it, he was just like, I'm making a film. I'm going to use my experience on transforming actual physical weapons to weapons that shoot blanks for movie theater, for movies and sound effects. And I was like, that's amazing, bro. I really want to help. But his whole focus was to expose the truth. So that's what Gray State was. And if you look at the world that we're living in now, his movie is a great depiction of what we're about to face. And as we talked about his film ideas and how he wanted to pursue Gray State and everything else, he would throw in his feelings about things like, yes, I do think that martial law is coming someday. Yes, we work for a system that, uses us as just numbers. We don't really mean anything. We're cogs in a wheel. And I'm sitting here absorbing all of this and I'm going, you know what? I see this. And I added my own information to it. And we would talk, many times when we were working out and everything, like, what are we doing here in Afghanistan? We're not obviously not here to liberate anybody. And he was just like, you're absolutely right. We're here for other things. And he would discuss his feelings about how he wanted to make a difference by telling the truth. That was his major focus about government and the control that we were under while serving in the military. And that was his passion. So
Very interesting.
Yeah,
So he was already
that's it.
talking about film school. He already had those plans. What year would you say that was? Would that be 2008,
2000,
2009?
2008, like about, oh, maybe a quarter into our tour there. And he actually ran into a snag. Like he wasn't getting paid there for a little while. And he was making no money whatsoever, and he couldn't, help out his wife back home or anything. And so I remember it distinctly. He went to our E7. Now David had deployed already multiple times, and he went to Sergeant First Class Gustavson and was just like, I can't do this anymore, man. I don't want to do this anymore.
Wow.
And I mean, that was huge. This is coming from a hard-nosed 11 Charlie infantry soldier who was a no beat type of NCO, but he was fair and balanced, like I said before. And he walked right in and was like, I don't want to do this. And so Stephen Christopherson understood. I mean, in hindsight, I'm pretty sure he was kind of PO'd about it, but he probably went, you know what? I'm going to do what's best for this soldier because he's not getting what he needs, and we're going to make it work for him. So he sent him back to Kandahar, which was our main hub, the airport, and he started working in the mailroom. And that's what kind of turned his life around a little bit and made him a little bit happier because he wasn't on the line or the front line. And his demeanor and his attitude changed every time I saw him after that. So that was an interesting transition for him.
Interesting. It was breaking up a little bit there, but I think I got it. I think
No worries.
it's okay. Yeah.
And so he was
But
already talking about his film ideas and everything way before that he had those issues or the issues that he faced. But yeah, he was discussing it and had plans. I helped him work on it a little bit with After Effects and showing him how to use those software programs because I had spent years already learning those programs in film school. So and at the Art Institute. So it was quite fun.
oh, that's cool. So you guys kind of bonded on the film school thing and all that too. It sounds like.
Well, yeah, because when he found out that I had gone to school for media arts and animation at the Art Institute of California, San Francisco in 2003 to 2006, he was just like, I got to talk to this guy. He obviously knows about special effects. He knows how to animate. He knows how to use this stuff. Back then, it was, we got a copy of something, we used it, and I showed him After Effects and Photoshop, and it helped brighten his world on how to make better films.
Very cool. That's awesome. San Francisco. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I was in the mecca of let's just call it Sodom and Gomorrah. It was pretty bad.
I hear it's worse now. Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad. Like, just to segue a little bit. I mean, I was raised in a lower middle class home in Sunnyvale, California, and I had everything I needed, but Dad was a bit hard. But I wanted to do something awesome with my life, and I decided that I was going to go study animation, and the closest school was San Francisco. And my dad just goes, "It's not like when I was there." And I was like, "I'm sure it's not." And I had to really maintain a humility and a moral focus because that place really did a number on me as far as temptation and such and whatnot.
Yeah, that's some might call that area the belly of the beast. I didn't live too far from San Francisco myself, where I grew up, so I can relate to that. So David was already kind of building this idea, maybe not the gray state, right? He probably, when you guys were serving, he probably never gave this a name or anything like that, but you could see that those seeds were already being planted. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay.
He was very, I mean, I don't use the term lightly. I mean, it's almost like it was destined to happen the way it did. Because when anybody decides to tell the truth in their own vision and they happen to be of military service, you're going to be a target no matter what. And if you're a believer on top of that in Yeshua HaMashiach, then, I mean, it makes it even harder because nobody wants to know the truth. They want to be happy in their own, covert worlds where they don't have to pay attention to what's really happening around them. So David was like, I'm going to take this by the horns and I'm going to tell people the truth. And that's what he did.
Very cool. Without fear.
without fear.
Did let me ask you this: Did you and David ever talk about God? Ever talk about your Christianity? Anything like that? Did those conversations come up?
I have to be transparent with you as all I can. I knew that there was a God, but when I was over there in Afghanistan, it wasn't something that we talked about much, because unfortunately, at that time in my young life, I thought I had lost my faith in God and in Yeshua, but in fact, what had happened is I lost my faith in humanity. So it was not a topic that we brought up much, but when we did, he was open to it. He listened to me when I had something to say, and that helped me understand what was happening to me when I was there, going to war. I mean, it changes people in different ways. And when I finally figured out that I had lost my faith in humanity and not Yeshua or Elohim himself, I I knew that my life was going to change for the better. And I wish I could have shared more of my knowledge with David at a later time or at that point, but it was designed the way it was. So at least we had found our friendship there and became brothers in arms at that time. I don't have any regrets about that.
Did is it? Let me ask you this, maybe a more general question, but is it frowned upon to talk about God, to talk about Christ? Was it frowned upon then? Was it allowed to even have a Bible? If I wanted to have a little pocket Bible, how does that
Oh
work?
yes, that the military is very, very open to people's faith, spiritual journeys, and religions. And we could talk about it openly, but then we had to also be open to the fact that there were Satanists, there were pagans, there were people who claimed to be Jedis, people who believed in the spaghetti. No joke, we had guys who had dog tags with Jedi on it. I mean, it was it's hilarious. But some guys, they believed in the spaghetti monster, and that's what they had on their dog tags. It's like anything was open, but if you talked about it too much, especially Elohim or Yeshua, you got some side-eyed looks. I mean, it's just kind of interesting that we got chaplains walking around everywhere praying at certain events and retirement ceremonies, but when you talk about it too much, people kind of give you that look like, okay, stop preaching. That was one of my nicknames, preacher.
Nothing wrong with that. That's a compliment, I would think. Um,
Not at all. It is.
all right, here's another question from Catherine. Did David ever come across as someone who was suspicious, or did he talk like someone who noticed things without constantly looking over his shoulder?
I never knew David to be like that. He was, as I've stated, he was very matter of fact, almost to the point of meticulous on a very stellar level as an NCO. No, he didn't have any fear of looking over his shoulder. He wasn't that type of person. If he was going to tell you the truth, he was going to accept the consequences that came with it. And doing what he did with Gray State is exactly what happened. He told the truth, and what he discovered and what he found while searching for that truth got him killed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This man was a seasoned infantryman that knew his tactics, that knew when things didn't feel right. And as soon as I found out that he had been murdered, okay, the first thing that I looked at was that, wait a second, this dude wouldn't leave a door unsecure. This is not the type of man who leaves his house unsecure. The back door being open just a little bit was the dead giveaway. I was just like, that's one of the first things we check is our doors. Sometimes multiple times before we go to bed. And if you got any soldier who's come back from war in a combat zone, they'll check their front, back windows 2-3 times before they go to bed. I mean, that's just a common practice for us. I still do it to this day. So that just blew my mind when I found out the truth, and I was just like, okay, now I got to do my research and see what I can discover from this.
Very interesting. We have a question from Derek too. He wants to know if you kept in contact with David after serving.
Yes, we did. While he was working on, great question too. While he was working on Gray State, I was still serving in the military, and he would, contact me. I think one of his best friends, Mitch, would contact me for ideas on how to write scripts for certain parts of the special effects, or how to do hard surface modeling for tanks and stuff, because they had to use 3D models in place of like some of the special effects they were doing. So I helped them a little bit with like finding different scripts online that could help them with tank treads and how to animate them properly and whatever. I didn't write these scripts. That's not my forte, but this is stuff that I found. I'm giving credit where credit's due. I would help them find like, little, work smarter, not harder ways. So if somebody had a script, as long as you gave them credit for using it in the film, it was all good. So that was one of the things I helped out with and showed them how to hard surface model back in the earth, like the later thousands, which was really difficult at that time. So yes, we had a lot of communication throughout the years, and told him about his family, how he was doing and whatnot. And then for a while there, I just stopped hearing from him for a few years. And I'd send a message every now and then, "Hey, how you doing, bro?" Didn't get anything back, and I was just like, "Okay, that's a little weird." And then that's when I found out that he was taken from us too soon.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Okay, here is another one. How did David handle the stress of battle?
Whew. Now that's a tougher one because, as I had told you before, when he was serving in Afghanistan, he went to RE7 and was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. So the stress that he was going through is that the very people that he was sent over to liberate and possibly take their life is somebody that he married. So I think that made a very vast impact on his viewpoints when it came to what we were doing over there. And I think that's something that changed him dramatically. So he didn't really, it affected him in different ways than most people would expect. He didn't, a lot of people, when we went over there, we hated the enemy for what they had done to us on September 11th. However you feel about that is irrelevant. But his demeanor and his attitudes changed towards people and their cultures.
Okay. Here's another one. Here's a question. Did he buckle under the stress? Did you ever see David Crowley buckle under the stress?
No, I was never. I never saw him ever buckle under anything. He was a pillar. Now that doesn't mean that inside he wasn't like having any issues. We all have our demons, but on the outside he was cool and collected. He kept his head about him, and that's what helped me become the NCO that I was. You can make a decision in a split second without regard to your life, but to save others, and that's what I took from him.
Okay. Here's another one. Did the men in your unit get to make the regular phone calls home? So how did that work? Were you able to call home, things like that?
Yes, we were MWRs, so the resource centers that we had, so that way we could use computers or call home. Those were built up later in our deployment, but when we first got there, it was just open desert with a few HESCOs. We'd send the combat engineers would go out there, and then they'd send small units of infantry and scouts with them and stuff like that to protect them while they were out there building up FOB Ramrod. So we didn't get anything for about 3 or 4 months, and the morale around the base and the FOBs and everything was very low because we would have to go back to Kandahar from the open desert where we were at about, I think it was about, let's say 45 to 50 clicks away. And I mean, that's a long haul to go use a computer. So once we got the MWRs to make consistent phone calls and stuff, it was a lot better. But at that time, David wasn't with us. He was in Kandahar still doing the mailroom. So he probably had access to the MWR on a regular basis.
Very interesting. Here is a question from Sophia. Did you ever think David was a narcissist or had any of those tendencies?
No, I never got a narcissistic vibe from him. I was married to a narcissist for 14 years, and you can spot that in a heartbeat when you're under their prison sentence. So yeah, no, I never got anything that was narcissistic about him. He was just a very deadpan, straight to the point type of person. And if you didn't know how to handle that, you would probably think he's coming off as narcissistic, but he's not. That's just how he was. When he joked around and had fun, I mean, he showed it. He showcased his joy when he needed to.
Very cool. And then Catherine's last question on this list: did David ever appear to be out of touch with reality?
No, that never. He was always head first into what he was doing, and the narrative that's been told through the media and everything else is a skewed representation of who he was as a person. And we can get into that when we start discussing the actual cause of his murder.
Let me ask you a question here. Did you was there anyone that did not like him? Did not like David Crowley that you served with that was open about it?
Nobody never ever voiced their opinion of it, but you're a villain in someone's story. So I'm pretty sure that some people didn't like him for staying back and being in the mailroom. I didn't hear anything about it because most of the soldiers that I worked with in the mortar platoons, they they enjoyed him because he was a good NCO, fair, and you could call him up so that, if you got in trouble at the strip club or whatever you were doing that was stupid at 2 a.m. because we don't make good decisions then. He didn't want it to go any higher than it had to go. So he made it a point to be the best version of himself that he could. So no, I didn't see any of that. No.
Have you do you know who Joseph Seaton is?
Yes, I do. He was one of my
Have you
officers.
one of the theories is that Joseph Seaton was David's commanding officer. Is that true or is that not true? Do you know?
Oh gosh, Seaton was one of our LTs at the time. I'm not sure if he was over David or not, but I do know that they had communications throughout the years. I mean, like I said, this is 15 years ago. I don't remember how the structure worked after David went to the mailroom, so it is a possibility that he could have been one of his officers. Yes, he was one of mine. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I was curious about that. There was
Mm-hmm.
another who would be David's commanding officer? Who would he
Oh,
report to? And the reason why I'm asking this is because, and I'm sure maybe it was multiple people at different times, probably during his service. But the reason why I'm asking this is because I had heard another story that he had a fallout, something very bad happened with one of his commanding officers, to the point where, well, that's all I want to say publicly, probably about that.
sure. No worries. To my knowledge, all I knew about was when he went to Sergeant First Class Christopherson to tell him that I didn't want to do this anymore. Now, what happened after that? Now, I was just a specialist. I didn't have access to the NCO knowledge tree or anything else above that. So, if anything happened with an officer, I was not a privy to it. But there was talk around the platoons that something was going down with Crowley, that he was going to back to Kandahar for whatever reason. I was just like, hey, you know what? He needs it. I agreed with it. I didn't care. I didn't have the experience of being at war like he did, so I wasn't going to hold it against him. At least he was honest with them.
Right. Sophia's asking about, do you know what Joseph Seaton's actual rank was?
At the time that I knew him, he had just become it was he was on his way to becoming a captain, I believe. But I think he was still I think he was a first lieutenant at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I think he was on his way to the captain school for I think whatever it is for like NCOs at WLC. He was going for his leadership course for becoming a captain, I believe. If I'm not that a long time ago though.
Are you in contact with any other soldiers that have served with David, or have you been in contact
That
since you?
Oh yeah, I'm actually here in Alabama. One of my best friends and brother in arms, Michael Williams, is actually out here, and he and I both knew him. Not I knew David more personally, but he knew of him and everything else. Met him like a few times, but yeah, he's out here, and he's a Purple Heart recipient, 10-year cavalry scout recon, and awesome dude. Like, has really helped me out a lot. And if David was alive, he would be like, dude, you guys are doing well.
That's awesome. That's great. Sophia has another question here. Do you know if Joseph Seaton was actually honorably discharged? Have you heard that?
I do not know
No.
if he was honorably discharged. I did have some contact with him to help him with a website and do some animation for him, but I never. I did the work and I never got paid, so you know how it is when that happens.
Mm,
So after that, I lost contact with him, so I do not know.
interesting. Um, well, maybe we'll jump into when you heard about when did you hear first that David Crowley had passed?
I was at my dining room table in Ohio. My wife was sitting on the couch. The TV was in front of me. It was on. She was watching something with the kids. It was later in the evening. We were just about to have dinner, and I was looking at my computer. I was working on my master's program for Full Sail because that's where I decided to go because David went there. And I was studying for my master's degree in media and design, and the news feeds came up, and I just stopped dead in my tracks. And I read it, and then I read it again, and then I read it again, and I just sat back in my chair and I said, "Babe, Crowley's dead." And I mean, as the words came out of me, it just hit me like a Mack truck straight to my soul. And she turned around and was like, "What?" And I was just like, "Yeah, David's dead." And then I subsequently just I fell apart. Like no joke, I fell apart right in my chair, and I was just like, "How does something like this happen?" And of course, you know, the instinctive thing to do as a human being is to know more, and it was the wrong thing for me to choose at that point. But I had to know the truth, so I scoured every news article, every thread, every YouTube video, everything I could find, and it was 100% true, and it crushed my soul.
Did you having served with him and having spoken with David after he passed, and knowing what PTSD is, obviously, did you ever get the feeling that David may have had PTSD?
We all come back from war different. I can't speak to what David had. That's not my place. Only what he went through is, and what is in his medical records is the truth. So I can't speak to that. He never displayed any signs to me, but you know, not all wounds are visible. I have PTSD, but anybody can. It doesn't have to be just soldiers or Marines or Navy or airmen. Anybody can get it. A child can from traumatic abuse. A female can get it from verbal abuse or physical abuse, and men can get it from different types of situations. So to that, I do not know.
Fair enough. That's a great answer. Um, do you think? Let me ask you this. Um, about people being falsely accused of having PTSD because they have their own narrative. Do you think do you have any problem with that as far as they claim David did? David acts like he doesn't. Actually, even Mitch Heil, who served with David, says he doesn't believe David had PTSD. And so it's kind of like I have an issue with it because they're trying to use it to fit into their narrative, not because he had PTSD. Let's help this guy. Well, he had PTSD. He went crazy and killed his family and killed himself. To me, that kind of
Right.
bothers me. Did you have any thoughts on the PTSD angle?
Absolutely. As anybody knows who served, as soon as you mention the word or the acronym PTSD, they automatically assume that, you know, you're a killer, you're a psychopath, you're a veteran who can't be helped, this, that, and the other. It's a stigma that falls upon us and it's wrong. And, you know, as far as fitting the narrative, absolutely. That's what they use as the scapegoat so that they could pull off this atrocity without anybody really looking into it. But then you have free thinkers and researchers like yourself, me, and everybody else who is like, I smell something foul, Basil. It's like we went through and we combed through the footage, we combed through all the pictures, we went through it, and we were like, David didn't do this. Even if he had PTSD or not, no way. There's no way. And this whole thing with Mitch saying that he did, he didn't. Well, you know what? Mitch has already made his point when he went on to whatever news source or put out those web pages. Justice for David Crowley, all that stuff. Somebody probably got to him too. Let's be real. Somebody probably
Yeah.
got to his family and got to David's family before they could really do anything about it, and they gave him an ultimatum. And it's like, here you go. Well, as anybody will say, Yeshua HaMashiach was given an ultimatum too, and that was either we as the people decided to choose Barabbas over him. So you know what? What happened to David is an atrocity. So PTSD, no PTSD, it doesn't matter. They used it as a narrative to get him killed.
Amen to that. Catherine is asking, did you ever think that what the police were saying was true? Was the official theory? Did you ever buy into it?
Nope, not once. And the first thing that was a dead giveaway was that the back door was unsecure. I was like, nope. That's the first thing. I don't care who you are. When you're in the infantry, you are trained. You are trained meticulously well to observe your surroundings and have situational awareness. There is no way a seasoned 11 Charlie infantry soldier like David Crowley would leave a back door unsecure. Nope.
And would that be even more true if David was thinking that he was getting threats, physical threats,
right,
or verbal threats?
Absolutely. If he was receiving any type of death threats or anything for his movie or whatever the case was be for telling the truth, that he would have been in a different mode. He would have been in not necessarily high alert, but he would have been in like, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm protected. Like I got my stuff locked and I'm going to double check the surroundings and just do an extra check around the house just to make sure everything's cool.
So you probably heard a lot of the different theories about what may have happened. Was it a government hit? Was David, because of his stop loss? Are there any theories that you kind of lean towards?
Absolutely. I've had contact with certain people on TikTok that remain anonymous over the years. And I received some very interesting communications from them, talking about David and that they were being pursued by the FBI, being pursued by other government agencies, and they couldn't talk, and all of this. And I was just like, hey, anything for David. And then I lost communication with them. But I tell you, David didn't do this. And the theory that I had was, and I believe it's true, is that while David was in the filming process, we have to understand that the viewpoint that he was trying to put across is what was coming, as far as martial law, the government, making us have chips to sign stuff, biblical prophecy, this kind of stuff. I mean, it was laced with it. And my theory is that what happens to be true is that what he discovered while he was in the filming process, I mean, he discovered some very, very interesting things while he was in his pursuit for truth. And I'll leave those things open to people's imaginations. You can imagine what's in the news now as far as child trafficking, sex crimes against children, adrenochrome, the underground military bases known as DUMBs, where they lead. And you can put two and two together and pretty sure that David found something along those lines, which is what got him killed because of his movie and what it was portraying.
Interesting. The other question was, do you think his death was related to anything that may have happened during his service?
I don't think it was necessarily due to his service. It could be a part of it, but they did blame most of it on what he was pursuing as a film. So yes, actually, there could be something along the lines of like somebody was unhappy that he was stop lost, or the falling out he had with former officers and NCO staff. Very much someone could have been involved in that, but I honestly truly believe that he was murdered because of his film and what he was trying to portray as the truth.
Let me quickly talk about two wild theories that I have heard. The first theory, one theory that I heard, was that David had put a hit on one of his commanding officers. Have you ever heard anything wild like that? And would that
No.
even be possible?
I'm sorry, I have to laugh out loud. No, I'm sorry that. Wow, like I should get a tinfoil hat, hat and all that. But that's even too much for me, bro. Like, come on, no, like David wasn't like that. Come on, I mean, gee whiz, where do you guys get this stuff?
Good
I gotta laugh
question.
out loud at that one. Yeah, I don't. Wow, no.
That's one of the wildest
Wow.
ones that I've heard.
That's
That was
that's a humdinger.
yeah. The other wild one that I've heard, I'll give you a second, but the other wild one that I have heard
I'm
is
sorry.
that it's okay. I don't know if I've ever publicly talked about that one, but that was a theory that came to me. That was a story that came to me a long time ago. And yeah,
Yeah,
so
no.
sometimes you get good leads, sometimes you get bad leads. I like to just follow up on every possible lead. But
Of course.
that was probably the wildest
No
one
matter
that I've
how
heard.
outlandish it's, yeah. I feel
The other wild one that I've heard, let me get your thought on this, that there was a curse, that something happened. I believe it was when David was serving in, I think it was in Iraq, and they had something happen. They ran over some kid. The kid got killed. The kid's mother was I don't know if she was a Satanist or she was a gypsy, if I remember correctly. It's been so long since I remember this story, but
okay.
she was a gypsy and she put a curse on that whole group of people. And so there was this theory that there is this curse. David is part of some curse as something that may have happened during his service days. Have you ever heard anything wild like that?
No, I can't speak to that. I didn't serve with David in Iraq, so I didn't know about that offhand. But I will say that anything is possible in that region of the world, because we have to remember that the 12 tribes, we originated from that area: Mitzrayim, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, that area. So you're dealing with a culture and a group of people who have not only the Muslim faith, but they also have underground Christianity, underground different types of religious sects that practice dark magic. So I wouldn't put it past them to do something like that. It could be a very, I mean, as outlandish as that sounds, if that's a story that people are tossing around, I'd like to find validity to that story. And then yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
I mean, there were a couple there are like at least two soldiers that served with David. I'm not exactly sure when, and I'm not sure if you know these names, but they did die. They have died since. One died, I think one committed suicide, and the other one was actually shot by a neighbor. And so that's when this story kind of came out. And again, these are just some of the things that I've heard. I have not really found any evidence to kind of back those up. But I wanted to get your thoughts on those two
Yeah,
wild theories.
I mean, and as crazy as it sounds, the latter theory about that lady putting a curse on, it actually kind of makes sense, because if you think about it, you have these other two soldiers who were involved in the same incident, and they were taken from us, one by his own hand and then one by a neighbor. So we can see that there's a correlation, because then you've got David and his family. So honestly, that theory is actually bringing more validity to the whole idea of what happened to them, because you can see as curses are done, there's good curses, there's good spelling in the case of how we view things, and our words are power. So yeah, I could see that affecting that group of people to manifest what that theory encompasses. Yes.
Yeah, and I couldn't ever get to the point to get that person to kind of come forward, but I think they also had their own issues too. So it's not just the deaths; it's that weird things are happening. But a lot of the stuff is kind of like, well, those are things that could happen from any soldier serving. They just want to drink themselves too much, right? They go into this really depressive phase, I guess. But so but that's pretty interesting. So I did want to
Hmm.
hear about that. Derek brings up a great comment here that I think a lot of people who have looked into this case probably have the same thing. Out of everything I've ever researched, this one hits me the hardest still to this day. To me, there's something very strange, something very different about this case and the layers of this case. What are
Yes,
your
indeed.
thoughts on this case compared to other murder mystery cases? I guess I'm sure you've looked into
Well,
others.
oh yeah, but of course, and you know, for anybody who's got a brain, you know, we like those old shows, Unsolved Mysteries, Cold Case Files, that kind of stuff. But put all that Hollywood, you know, stuff and whatever away, and you come down to this particular instance where you have a soldier who has infantry experience. He's married to a woman from Iraq, and I think she was from, I think it was, yes, I think she was of Iraqi descent. And then they have a child together, and you see in the photos and what's been released, what hasn't been released, and all that, and you start to dissect what you see. And as somebody who's, you know, had to engage in combat and deal with people, you notice things that other people don't. And especially when your adrenaline's pumping and stuff like that. My adrenaline was pumping when I was looking at these photos. And as I've stated in just recently, the first thing that stood out to me when I was looking at these photos was that the way the bodies were lying, and also the back door being unsecure, and then the use of actually writing that message with blood and the Quran and everything having to do with that. I was like, you know, if I wanted to paint a narrative and make a, you know, a former soldier who had a good rapport with his team and everything else, was on his way to becoming a filmmaker and establishing himself, how would I make it so that way he could be discredited for the rest of his life? Well, they turned to that. They turned to writing a message in his own blood, which would scare anybody away. So as I was dissecting all this, I'm like, that's not the man I knew, nor would this man ever commit such an atrocity. And I just don't see where this is going. So then that led me down to the different YouTube videos that were being posted, the different theories along the lines of different articles and everything. And then as the years started to pile on, the theories got more outlandish and more crazy and everything else. And I was just like, no one's ever going to know the truth. Only people who truly knew him are going to understand that this was not committed by David. This was definitely a setup.
Yep. Good point. Have you seen Eric Nelson's film A Gray State?
No, I have not watched it. I actually didn't know it got completed because I had stayed away from this for quite some time. The knowledge of David passing made it very difficult for me to participate in any of that. So no, I have not seen the film.
Yeah, it's basically they basically use David's footage, and they basically say that David went into this dark space. He killed himself. They don't provide any evidence or anything like that. It is a 90-minute hit piece on David Crowley. That's what. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe 87 minutes. There may be a few minutes in there that talk positively about him, but that's really it. Most of it is just, and they never provide any evidence to say, well, look, this is why David did it. They had the gun, they got the murder weapon. He has a written confession, anything like that. They also try to make it seem like David's deal was dead. David's deal was not dead.
Mhm.
The only reason David's deal died is because David died. So there's a lot of
Exactly. He was on his.
inconsistencies.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking to that, I mean, he was talking to National Geographic. He was talking to different film companies. He was on his way to making this film his his dream child for and platform to tell the truth. And if he had succeeded, I mean, gee whiz, would we be in the situation we are now if people knew about his truth or his version of it? So absolutely, this was. I mean, and I'll never watch that film if it's a hit piece on David. I mean, that's just them feeding into the narrative so they can bury this. I mean, that's the only thing you can do with truth is bury it. But eventually, everything comes to the light, for no darkness can escape it.
Amen. Amen to that.
Yes, sir.
What was the other one here? So what are some of the things that kind of stand out? You said the rear slider, that was a big one. Let me ask you this. What would you need to convince you that David Crowley did do this? What evidence would you need to see?
Oh, well, if he actually did, commit suicide in that, one, you wouldn't have had anything to do with the Quran or writing any message in blood or anything like that. He would not have hurt his family. He would have just hurt himself, and all the doors and windows would have been secure. And he would not have done it at home, most likely.
Now, you and David had obviously talked about different film things. David probably knew that you were from California, right?
California,
Yeah. if you're still there, man, I'm praying for you if you're still there. So, but
no,
whoever is, no, I know you're not. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. Anybody who's gonna get out while you can.
Yes, please, if you can, please.
Right.
And if you can't, that's okay. Maybe that's where God wants you. That's possible too.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
did David ever talk about moving to California, going to California? Did you guys ever talk about anything like that, or?
No, I mean, he was happy where he was at. I mean, he had his family, he had his house, he was on his way to making his film, and I mean, all of that was great. He was living the dream. I was sitting there still going to PT at 04:30. I mean, he was living the life.
The full sale that he was talking about, that's in Minnesota. That's his.
No, it's actually in Florida, Orlando, Florida.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes, yeah, he went there for. Yeah, that's where he went to film school, and then because he went there and graduated, I decided to get my master's degree from there in media and design. So I went to that school because David said that I had a keen eye for film and animation, and I was giving him good insight. So that's one of the reasons why I went to that school and graduated with flying colors.
Very cool. Right on.
Yes, sir.
Trying to think if I have any more questions. I mean, those are pretty much a lot of the questions, and thank you so much for answering these. I really appreciate that. If we wanted to come back and do a part 2, maybe have some other people on this panel, would you be open to that at a later time?
I'm 100% open to this. One of the benefits of being retired at such a young age now, yes, I was medically retired, but you know what? It was for a good reason when I was injured over there. So I have a lot of free time. So if I can give people solace in knowing that one greater than us is coming back, and we can tell the truth with his glory and his mercy and with him as our center, then I'm going to tell the truth. And David's story needs to be told. And he was a good, righteous man who was brought into an evil situation, and unfortunately he was taken from us. But that doesn't mean that his truth can't be told. And that's what I'm going to do. So yes, I'd be happy to join you again.
Thank you, my friend. Now you are on social media. Please let us know where you're on, what social media platforms you're on, and the different topics, everything that you cover.
Oh, certainly. What I'll do is I'll send you my link to my TikTok. It's Warrior for Yeshua, spelled out. And you can find me there. And mostly what I discuss is what's going on in the world right now, truth, quantum physics, Rubik's Cubes, and what Yeshua HaMashiach did for us, which is die on the cross so that we could live and an eternal life with him forever. And though we're going through a very hard tribulation right now with the rumors of wars and nations against nations and brother on brother, we have to understand that this is a part of our journey to attain that eternal life, because the path is wide, but the gate is very narrow. We need to be prepared.
Amen. Amen.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking this time. I want to thank Derek for making sure that this happened. I want to thank God for everything, making sure that this happened. Everything happens for a reason. I believe this is a great reason. I've been praying about this I've been praying about, talking to soldiers. I've had some that kind of wanted to talk, but then, didn't.
Things didn't work out. Yeah.
Things didn't work out. Thank you. But yeah, I'm really glad that you spent this time, and I hope some other soldiers may look at this and may be open to talking too. I feel like there are some soldiers that serve with David that may need that closure, that may also feel the same way you do, and maybe they're not able to come out, they're not ready to come out, they don't want to talk about it. They could be very fearful of it, of
Yes.
things like that happening to them. I don't know how that would affect their military future or their future on anything like that. Are there any issues with that? Do you have any problem? Do you ever think about that? Like, if I come out and talk about this, maybe they may come after me.
I've always had that underlying, anxiety. And I've always told myself that if they wanted to come after me, they would. So you always have to have that in the back of your mind. We're speaking truth. And it says over 365 times in scripture to never be afraid. And then I'll leave you guys with this. Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your Yahweh. So show no fear. And if I can tie it back into the disciples and what they had to go, they died excruciatingly for faith. All of them. Only one of them ended up going to the prison mines and dying there instead of being beaten to death or crucified or whatever the case may be. In order to seek truth and righteousness, you have to be willing to die for it. And that's why I believe that Yeshua HaMashiach died on the cross for all of us so we can live. No fear.
No fear. Amen. Thank you very much. I think that's a great place to end this right here. I want to thank everybody who has watched this, everybody who will see this. If you have any questions, we're going to get him back on at some point here. So if you have any questions that we didn't get to, I know I just kind of sprung this. We just went live, like, boom, we're live. Okay, good. So questions may start filtering in, and we'll be happy to do a part 2 and have you come back and answer some of those questions. So thank you very much.
I appreciate you, Mr. Craig, and everybody else who is involved, and Mr. Derek. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll see you guys soon. Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh. God bless you all.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.
You too.